Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest, Dr. Sanjay Juneja, who's here to share with us his new book, We Need to Talk About Cancer, an important book for parents, family, and friends. So how do we talk about cancer without fear and with understanding? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Dr. Sanjay Juneja is a triple board-certified hematologist and medical oncologist, serving as Vice President of AI and Medical Informatics for Tempus AI. In this role, he leads clinical AI strategy and initiatives that bridge cutting-edge artificial intelligence with real-world oncology practice. So welcome to the show, Dr. Sanjay Juneja.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Honestly, I think so. My wife is also a cancer doctor, and we were talking because we saw something on the news about how, like another young mother, young kids, and we have three, young kids ourselves. And my wife was saying, it's sad because it's not like kids don't hear about cancer and kind of everything scary about it on the news and on TV, et cetera, but there's really not much directed towards placating or just addressing what some of their questions might be, concerns, or even educating them for something that is kind of in the press and media to be something that one should be aware of, if not scared of. So that's kind of where it really originated.
And so it's beautifully illustrated. So who is this book designed for?
The book's designed for kids that are like 10 to 14 years old and young adults, but I've had several patients read it too that are non-medical and said that it was helpful to understand kind of all of these things that are thrown at you when you have a cancer diagnosis, from radiation to surgery to chemotherapy, targeted therapy. There's just so many terms, and from my social media kind of life, for 5 or 6 years of explaining things with metaphors and everyday kind of analogies. It was something that was fun to write because I was able to kind of share the ones I'm doing a lot in the patient room, but in a book that seemed to work well when I would be educating on my social media handles.
So why do you believe that conversations about cancer are often so difficult for patients and families and friends?
I think they take time, and the healthcare system, the traditional one, isn't really made for that. I mean, you have an hour visit that's allowed for the first time visit, but everyone after that has to be 15 minutes. And there's a lot of, information that is this science-based stuff that we learned and the way we, enact certain treatments. But then there's stuff that's less science-based, and it can be very conflicting and kind of impair trust. And it's just important to share all the sides, try to validate and give merit to whatever one may read if there's a source of truth there, but then explain maybe how it's applying differently when it comes to the treatment and what we've learned in studies, etc. It's a complicated subject that's not one that can't be understood. It just takes time, I think. And I think the more you learn, and I've been told this for my patients and their family members, the more you understand, the less intimidating something scary becomes.
Well, it seems a lot of people just don't have the vocabulary for how to support somebody who is going through cancer. Or has a cancer diagnosis. It's like, what do you say? How do you best support them?
Exactly. And that was something that really kind of broke my heart repeatedly when a patient's loved one would say, "Hey doc, can I talk to you for a second after?" And then at first they would express, "I'm just so tired, like I'm trying to be positive, I'm trying to say the right things, but I'm scared and I don't want to mislead them. And it really shed some light on just how much emotional conflict there was with trying to do the most with while at the same time not having, a script of what is the right way. And then of course every person is different. And that's really what the second half of my book or last third is, which, took probably more research and studying and literature kind of review than the oncology part, just being an oncologist. And that was what works, what doesn't, what is some of the emotional and psychological, what are some of the factors that are at play, and how do you, regulate them? How do you take care of yourself as someone caring for someone that may pass away, in a time frame that's more in front of you? Is it wrong to say that I am scared? Is it wrong to say nothing? Is it wrong to not say you got this or don't think that way? It's all very challenging, and I tried to cover some of that in the book too.
Well, I think it would be very difficult, especially if someone's given a severe cancer diagnosis, to figure out like what do you say, because you might saying that you'll be okay might not really be true.
Right. And it may make the patient feel in a position that if, they are stage four, which stage four patients can live years now and have a good quality of life depending on the disease type. But if it's technically incurable and one is tired, then I've heard patients share like, doc, I'm tired and I really am so proud of myself and at peace with how long I did have on this journey and what I've tolerated, dot, dot, dot. But I don't want to let my, family down because they still tell me that, I'm going to beat this, etc. But truly I'm at peace. And so there's another invitation to having to breach a conversation of remembering or recalling what we all want in our loved one, which is to, uh, make them the most comfortable and have them happy. But I think, again, guidance is necessary just because for many, it's the first time that any of us are in these situations.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about supporting someone with cancer?
From what I've learned, both in writing this, but also from patients, is one that probably the biggest misconception is that patients always want or need to be told what to do or where to be directed or how to feel. And I've just heard and seen many times that sometimes patients like, I already have a ton of information, or I know what I need to do, or what's at hand, and what my options are, and I feel peace with my options. But what I really need is just like, a more generalized support. I think now in an information rich era, and I'm maybe naively, I always believe that humans and all of us always mean to do well. I think a lot mean to do well by sharing, well, did you hear about this? And did you know about this? And I heard there was a person here, that can do such and such. And I've I've just been told that sometimes knocks the wind out the sails a little bit when you have come to a plan and, a schedule and a decision with your family and your oncologist. You do all of this and then you hear that, and it may dissuade a little bit. But that's why cancer patients truly are just some of the strongest people, because it's like somehow they have the grace and wisdom to know where, someone's heart is and what they mean by it, and not be derailed. It's just truly inspiring. I'm not just saying that, to see the kind of strength that just grows truly week to week when somebody's faced with a diagnosis with their own, mortality at risk. I can't describe it.
I can imagine it's very interesting how strong the human spirit is when we're faced with extreme challenges.
Yes, that.
So, what are some? I know in your book you go over quite a bit the different types of cancer, the stages. What are some of the signs that people should possibly look for to determine whether or not they need to see their doctor and if it could be cancer?
I mean, I think at the very least, the safest thing that one can do is to get their regular visits, get their basic blood work. They're not cancer tests per se, but they can definitely clue into to potentially things going on that show a little, abnormal stuff from 2 or 3 degrees of separation. So the lab work's very important, but then of course the screening. I think one of the hardest things that I've that we've all as oncologists seen is when a patient or family goes, and I meant to get that mammogram, it was just busy, or I really meant to get that colonoscopy, just, time got lost because I was taking care of my mom who was sick. And then now they're plagued with this guilt forever that may or may not even be relevant. Like it's possible that it would still be, a stage 3 or 4 setting if they found it at that time, etc. But having to have that linger is just one extra element that breaks my heart, where, you don't know, but you can't remove that thought. So the least, uh, one can do, and I always try to encourage, is the stuff that's recommended that you need to do and you haven't gotten to, is just think of it as a hedge. Just do all of those things. So then you have the peace of mind of saying, I did everything I was supposed to do. And then outside of that, a couple of the signs are just like mostly just abnormal weight not loss, or abnormal, or how do I say this? Basically, like lack of appetite, where you don't even have this drive to eat and you're losing weight. Those kind of things might signal that something's, in distress physiologically.
Well, that's definitely good to know. I'm sure a lot of people are um, appreciate spending the time with their doctor to make sure that they're getting all the tests done and that they're staying as healthy as they can. If someone has received a cancer diagnosis, what are some of the most important conversations that they really should have with their healthcare team?
Yeah, for sure. I think always asking, number one, I'm a big proponent of this, is clinical trials. And I say that because if anyone isn't enthusiastic about maybe, some treatments or medications we've used for decades, the only way any treatment ever is recommended, including some of the immune therapies and targeted therapies that have just blown the lid off of survival in some tumors that we had very little success in. Every one of those came from a trial. So a drug that is the newer drug, or the one people get excited about or you read about, will only be recommended once it's been proven on a trial to beat whatever the standard is. So the way you access those medications are trials. Now, the important thing is you have every bit of the right to ask, well, how does this differ from the standard of care? Like, is the standard of care like 3 or 4 years in a stage 4 setting? And what, if that's the case, that's very different than a 3 to 3 months standard of care first line therapy, gets an individual. Or oftentimes it'll be what we do today, but then an extra, targeted therapy. So there's all kinds of uh, details behind it that I hope patients feel entitled to really understand if it makes sense. But to not ask would not make one privy, if it's not offered, to the newer stuff that we've learned, so to speak. And then outside of that, I would, just be very forthcoming about any of your questions, and expect them to be answered. Like, what is the chance, percentage of success? Um, Recognizing that a lot of that is, obviously based on data in the past. So like so many things have come out that have changed the way we're able to treat things, and yet a lot of our survival data or response data is from the teens or early 2000s, and so every case is unique, and that's something very important to remember. And thirdly, I would say nutrition. Like, anyone that tells you nutrition doesn't matter, and diet and exercise is not going by science and evidence, because there's plenty of that. And if you can't have a nutritionist in your hometown, if there's just not one available, there are ones that are cancer specific and online that you can ask your doctor to recommend to, that are academic. But it does, the data is there to make a difference on, with other things all being equal, on how one feels and potentially even responses.
Are there any, and I'm probably sure that there are, but is there like one that you can share with us, like an exciting treatment for cancer? That's something that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, there's this thing called, you might have heard of it. It's like CAR T therapy. And what that does is, we have immune cells that fight sketchy things in our body all the time, whether it's a foreign body, a virus, or even a cell that looks sketchy, for lack of a better term. And then these T cells are part of that system that keeps everything in check. Sometimes they're just not sharp enough to be able to see something that's kind of under the radar. So what you do is you take a piece of this bad cell or this bad cancer, for example, say it wears like an orange feathered hat. and that is staple to this bad cell. Well, you tag on this orange feathered hat or a wanted poster with the orange feathered hat onto this T cell, and then you put that T cell in the human body. So whether you're taking the T cells out from the person, their own T cells, and tagging it, or some of the newer stuff, you can actually even potentially just have T cells delivered. You've kind of increased the uh, uh, surveying or what they're looking for. And by that hat, it's a protein or it's a feature of this cancer. So you can imagine if your cancer is uniform and all of them express this protein or hat, then you can have some incredible responses because now you have this smarter targeted way of attacking the tumor.
Well, that is pretty exciting. My goodness.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, and it's showing data even in autoimmune disease. So things like lupus and rheumatoid also are problems with what are called antibodies. So you check for an antibody to see if you have it, which is a protein, and they're looking at taking the same CAR T therapy and saying, well, can we attack that protein? And if those are the, bad players, can we stop that inflammation or those processes? And sure enough, there's data that shows that it's able to be effective in those scenarios as well.
Well, we live in such a great age where there's so much new information coming forward, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, that sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
It kind of has me thinking. I mean, I'm pretty sure you see in your office all the time just emotional challenges that patients and caregivers face that go unspoken. What are some of them that you can share with us?
It's so many and it's hard, but I would say the ones that get me the hardest are really the spouse, and duration is obviously variable, but the ones that I've seen that have been married for 30, 40, 50 years, I practice in southern Louisiana, so relationships are sometimes very long and because they're found early, and those challenges are very hard. Like where you truly, me and my team, I'm a nurse practitioner and MA, we just worry for the spouse on the when, of sometimes these, I hate to use the word terminal, but truly they're just some cancers you can't cure. That's really challenging. And you wish you could somehow be there for the spouse that you have gotten to know well because you're seeing each other every couple of weeks for, years. And then, but you can't, like, our system isn't set up for that. So, like, a lot of times they'll be heartbroken. They're like, I don't get to see any of y'all again. And, it just abruptly ends. And that's, I think, it's heartbreaking, when you care and a tough one. And I wish, and there are things that are happening to be able to support spouses during the process or loved ones, children, whoever it may be, parents, during the process. So if it's not the oncologist able to refer the family member, even the primary care physician that's perhaps in that same network or institution or ecosystem can proactively refer someone to help with the support through the process and afterward, if they have to be met with that. The second piece where we could do a lot of good, and that's partly behind the book, is like we don't really like younger kids below 18 a lot of times aren't even allowed in the adult oncology clinic because a lot of our patients are immune compromised in some manner, meaning that they can get infection kind of easily. And then when you have organisms that cause infections in kids that may not be as common in adults, now you're really, risking the patients that are there for their treatments. My point in saying all that is then the kids aren't even there to be able to hear from the doctor, exactly what is potentially keeping them up at night. So that's a big challenge that I think would take, a lot of coordination between pediatric doctors and adult doctors that are unfortunately not oncology and somehow finding this multidisciplinary approach. But I'm saying a bunch of stuff. All that to say, I do think AI and technology is going to help kind of ligate or tie up a lot of these loose ends to hopefully make everything more fluid because everything does touch everything and everyone touches everyone, but we have a very disjointed system. But I do think technology is going to be able to fill some of those holes.
Oh, that will be good because then there could be really honest and clear communication that's happening with the entire family.
Yes, and informed, which, truly I believe is empowering. I mean, what what made me even go into medicine, I always wanted to be a middle school science teacher actually because I had an awesome one. but I got into a car accident in high school, and I was like legally blind for weeks because of the trauma from the airbag. And then my friends would ask, much later, oh, well, weren't you scared you wouldn't, not see again, et cetera? And I was like, I really wasn't. And I couldn't understand why. Didn't know if I was being naive. And then when I thought about it, it was because my ophthalmologist, the eye doctor, really just explained everything to me. And I was non-medical at this point, and everything from pressure to buildup to why we're dilating the eyes to what that's doing to the pressure, which is relieving tension on the area that provided the blood supply around the retina, which he just explained all this stuff. And uh and then I had goals. I had many goals, and with the more I understood, I had my eyes, no pun intended, on exactly what needed to happen next. And that's where, this idea of going into medicine and specifically oncology came. I was like, well, if there's got to be scary stuff and we can make scary stuff less scary by explaining and teaching, which is the classic term behind doctor, I'm told, is the root word is being a teacher. That's something that I take high responsibility with. But also, I believe that some of these large language models and AI and stuff can finally do right by people and provide those things as they become more accurate and as they become more creative with their analogies. If you're a chef, if you're a mechanic, if you're a roofer, I mean, it's unbelievable how good they can get at being able to use appropriate metaphors and concepts that you can relate to. And I think that'll really transform some of these harder illnesses.
Does that doctor know the impact he's had on your life and career?
I believe he does. I came back to my hometown after fellowship and residency and all, and he I was doing something in the paper, and he saw the article, and he texted me, and I had him come over, and it was great because I got to introduce him to my wife, and yeah, and he's very humble, and not surprisingly, and shy about it, but he's been a big inspiration.
Oh, what a great story. I mean, it's so interesting the paths we take and how we find our way. One of the things I really appreciate about your book is that you also talk very openly about death. And I think a lot of people, they struggle with that. I mean, we're not going to be here forever. And I really appreciate that you handled that so well in your book.
Oh, I appreciate that. I remember I had a more blunt attending. I'll leave out the name, but in my training, and we were in a room, and I don't remember. I pray that it wasn't in front of the patient, but like, it was something to the effect of the question, like, "Am I going to die?" And the like, well, the answer is yes. Kind of not sarcastically, but the reason I'm sharing the story is it made me realize I'm like, that's true. Like, even the question, "Am I going to die or pass away?" Like, is we almost forget. Like, the answer is yes for all of us. But it's something challenging and different to everybody. But I, I think the best we can do is try to be as close to comfortable with those discussions as we can be. I don't know that anybody will be fully comfortable or always have the right answer, but it's just it's an evolutionary process, and I learn more kind of with every day and every conversation.
I think it's an important discussion to have because it is a part of life. What is one thing that you'd like our listeners and readers to take away from we need to talk about cancer?
Oh, if there was one thing I would ask or hope that the treatment of cancer to just like give it some grace. I saw a lot on social media that, you know, some oversimplification of a process that just is not what other disease types are because it's not foreign. Cancer is you, like it is your own DNA and cells and a tumor and a collection of the toolbox that all of your other cells share. So that's what makes it so challenging. How are you supposed to unwind or unravel evolutionary fitness in something that is actually made up of your own cells, right? And that's why silver bullets are hard to find, so to speak. And so I just hope that it gives the treatment some grace and the field to be met with humility, but then also um, in some of those discussions about the treatments, now understand conceptually how these work, why they work, why we should be encouraged and optimistic about some of the newer treatments I talk about and how they are designed. I think there's more sense and logic to cancer that we realize now that doesn't make it as nebulous as before, but at the same time, it can't be oversimplified. And I guess, if nothing else, the complexity of it is one thing that I would hope one could appreciate.
Well, Dr. Sanjay, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and for to everyone for listening in general and trying to, make the most of themselves. I think it's so admirable.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sanjay Juneja. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, We Need to Talk About Cancer, an important book for patients, family, and friends. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.